Hey guys, this is Pastor Mac, and we are here with the New Day Church podcast, where we talk about things that are happening in the life of New Day Church, as well as content that we believe is good for your spiritual growth and flourishing. Before we jump into things today, why don't you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like this podcast, and then prepare to share this podcast so that you can keep up with the newest things happening as we post new content and things that we believe are good for you. That being said, today is going to be a great day. We're talking about kids ministry here at New Day Church, and I actually have the opportunity to have this great conversation with James. James is the executive pastor of New Day Church, but he also, in all the things that he does as the bishop, as the man that makes this thing work, he oversees kids ministry at New Day Church. And so we get to talk about things today and what's happening. So Pastor James, what's up?
What's up, man? Dude, that was one of the best intros in the history of the New Day podcast. So I want to give you that.
Oh, thank you, man.
That was really
and
good.
I didn't have to make anything up because it's all true. So.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk to you about, and you guys about kids ministry. And, I've got young kids and you got kids all ages, so I feel like you got a lot to talk about here as well. But man, I want to talk about kids ministry, not just because it's a ministry that I personally oversee, but also one that I've been like more passionate about as time has gone on. I think when you have kids, you start thinking about that a little bit more and about just the chaos of the world that they're about to emerge into and the short amount of time that we have to like kind of disciple and love them in our house. And so kids ministry is something that has definitely like grown on me over time, but I'm really excited about New Day Kids Ministry because it feels like a moment, like this is a special and unique moment in the life of this particular ministry. Sometimes in like church world, like you do different ministries and maybe the demographic is smaller or maybe like the cultural circumstances don't lend to just like this powerful moment that I feel, and you're just faithful in those times, and so that was kind of like trying to lead church through COVID, it's just like probably not gonna be like really awesome dynamic Sundays during that, or online church, but right now it just feels like for like New Day Kids Ministry, there's this moment, and I feel that in my spirit, and I really want to like press into that and lead people through that as a church. Our kids ministry is kind of unique because on any given Sunday, about half the people who are on campus on Sunday morning are 10 and under. Oh, right. Wow. So, if we have X number of people on campus, half of those are adults, half of those are kids 10 and under. And so it's basically another service. Half your church is under the age of 10, and not a lot of churches can say that. So we're very unique in that front. And so it makes me want to kind of like steward and be responsible as we kind of lead this ministry together as a church. So a couple of reasons why I'm excited for it. Number one is, this year we started a new curriculum. I think it's really important not just to have kind of a safe kids ministry that's like check mark number one, a fun kids ministry. You don't want to be boring, we've all been in those experiences. It's like
tell the truth.
A small room, and one teacher and love her, but she's doing her best, but she's reading out of the curriculum book. And so we want it to be safe, we want it to be fun, but also we want it to be biblical and actually relevant to these kids' lives. And one of the challenges that I feel like I've seen is like you'll go try to find curriculum. Are they super expensive, by the way, to buy curriculum? There's a whole market out there, but it's really hard to like find those things. And so this year I was like, let's just develop our own. And so we pulled together a couple of different resources, and we just basically are going through the Bible big picture in a year. So starting with creation and just going through the Old Testament and going into the Gospels and really trying to relate these stories to Jesus and think about it big picture, and Matt, correct me if we're wrong. You grew up in church, right?
Yes,
right.
sir.
So when you grow up in church, man, you don't realize how much of like a foundational understanding of the Bible you have the opportunity to get if the church is presenting that. And what I've seen a lot of times, even with the people that maybe go to New Day, like a lot of times this is their first church experience, or they didn't have a really strong church experience growing up. And so they don't have, they're doing their best, but they don't have that foundational understanding of the Old Testament, like who is Elijah, who is Moses, why are these people important in the big story? And they are important because otherwise God would have just given us the Gospels, And so these things are important. And so when I was in fifth grade, my Sunday school teachers, who happened to be my parents, by the way, so just good, pros and cons to that, but they were wonderful teachers, and that was their big kind of hallmark. They wanted the kids to know like kind of the Bible, big picture, and what they saw happened oftentimes in kids ministry is they would find that kids would think that like Jesus and Moses were walking around at the same time, right? So they're walking the earth at the same time. They had no concept of like time has passed, and this is how Moses in the Old Testament sets up Jesus. And so that's really kind of my heart in going through the Bible this year is really to set that understanding and that foundation for these kids and really give them that opportunity to build on that foundation over the course of their lives. So really excited about that. I'm also excited about a concept that I'm introducing this year. Basically the fourth Sunday of every month, we're doing what I'm calling a Gospel Sunday. And so Gospel Sundays are basically, just think about like kind of fun youth group lock-in night, you know? So like a lot of fun, but you're going to get the gospel that Sunday. And that's kind of the vision for these. So basically, you know, we're planning really fun Sundays every fourth Sunday of the month. It's a chance for kids to invite their friends, and we're really going to try to build that culture of kind of inviting their friends and making this a thing that they can feel comfortable inviting their friends to. And then on that Sunday, just kind of like really dialing in and talking about Jesus, presenting the gospel in steps that they like really understand, and then inviting them to say, hey, like, talk to your parents about this. And we're going to send home like little cards on those Sundays that parents can use, that if you have a kid in New Day Kids, like you can get this card and it has like some questions that you can ask your kid in response to kind of what was taught on that Sunday. Because that's what church is. Like, we're not responsible for the discipleship of kids. Like, we are, like, parents are responsible for that, right? For passing on the faith. And we'll talk about that in a second. But we partner with parents in doing that. And parents trust us every Sunday morning, not just to keep their kids safe, but also to help them as they disciple their kids. So really excited about kind of this opportunity to invite kids into faith steps with Jesus, or baptism, or even understanding or asking questions about the faith that they get taught every single week. And then the last one that I'm really excited about, and I'm kind of building this, and this is more like a church term, and the term is catechism.
There you
we
go.
should try to spell that, you know. But a catechism is basically kind of like simple statements that help teach kids about the faith. And you're usually like question and answer. So like who is God? And it'll have a very simple answer. Or what did Christ do? And it'll have a very simple sentence answer. And kind of my hope is to kind of build kind of a New Day catechism based off the stories that we're learning and the things we're teaching in the Bible, so that by the time a kid gets to fifth grade, or by the time they move on from the New Day Kids ministry into our youth group ministry, that they're going to understand some of these core foundational doctrines or teachings of the faith, right? So I'm really serious and really committed to those things. And then the last thing I'm really excited about is just fun, man. We're incorporating like a lot of cool elements. Like, we got the New Day youth student band who's going to be coming, and they're going to be making appearances in our kids ministry. And
that's awesome.
You know, not only is that fun to have, you know, Britton, who's our creative director and also the one who leads New Day students, just in the house with us, you know, that's really exciting. But also just to teach kids about like, this is what corporate like worship is. This is worship through singing. And I love that, because like there's always a reason to sing. That's why we sing. And you're teaching kids like, this is one way that we express love and adoration for God. So super excited about kids ministry right now. But what about you, man? So your kids are in our kids ministry too. And so, man, what are you excited about for kids ministry in general?
Well, yeah, I think that, you know, I think you're right about, you know, so much of what we're talking about here. I mean, one, parents, we are the primary disciplers of our kids, you know, but the church comes and walks alongside of us. And to me, the excitement for me is being able to have a season of equipping. And honestly, when we look at the direction that we're going, I think that it's a well-rounded approach to, you know, how we help parents disciple their kids. There are things that our kids should know, but we don't want, and what sometimes we struggle with, is to separate like knowledge of God from actual mission of God. And so I do want my kids, and I want all of the kids to know things about God, like what is the Pentateuch, Genesis through Exodus, you know, and to know, you know, facts. But I also want them to know the greater story, like what is the point of all this? Like, what has God been doing in the Old Testament? That's why for me, my Bible reading plan this year, not that I haven't done this before, but the emphasis for this year was reading through the Bible again, and over the course of the year. And it, you know, when you read it and understand the greater story, it's there. But then also like the mission, inviting your friends, talking to your friends about church and God. To me, that's so huge, that our kids would be engaged in sharing their faith long before they ever end up on a mission trip in their teen years or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So,
well, man, real briefly, can you talk about Jaden? Because you just had an awesome thing happen.
Yes.
And, so you had the opportunity to baptize your son, and basically he invited some friends to that. So I just want you to share about that briefly.
Yeah, so really awesome. Discipleship is important because you get to walk with your kids and teach them about God. We do family worship in our house every night, and so we read, pray the Bible, pray, sing scripture together. And it's not long. I mean, my kids, the oldest is 8 and the youngest is almost 2. So, it's something that we do. But that 8 to 10 minutes that we reserve for that as a family is really huge. And it was in family worship that we started talking with Jaden about that. He really started pressing us about faith in Jesus. And, he put his faith in Christ, and then we didn't push baptism. Cause one, we're trying to be like, is this for real? Or are you, where are you? And he was so young when he was professing faith in Christ. And then ultimately he just came to us and was like, I need to follow in obedience with baptism. You're holding me back from my next spiritual walk, I felt bad, he's like, we need to do this. I believe in Jesus. I want to tell the world. And the cool thing for him was to be able to go to his friends at school and to invite them to church. He's always been about that. Ever since he put his faith in Jesus, and started talking that way. When we would sing worship in in our family worship time, something like This Little Light of Mine, he was the one that added a verse at the end, all around our neighborhood, I'm going to let it shine. And that's his emphasis. That's what I love about my son, is that he genuinely wants people to know about Jesus. And when he figured out that people don't know about Jesus, he was like, well, then we got to tell them. Let's start churches so that people know him. So that's been really cool. He brought friends. He talks about Jesus. He goes to a Christian school, but he also recognizes that not everybody at his school knows Jesus. So that's kind of where we are.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Well, so we're really excited about kids ministry. Also, it's not all easy. There are challenges to it as well. And so, man, me, my heart is always I like to pop the hood up and just, let's just see what's going on in there, and kind of some of the back behind the scenes things in kids ministry. And so, man, just a couple of challenges that we face kind of uniquely maybe in this season is, number one, we've shared with a lot of people kind of some of our struggle to find a dedicated kids director. And I don't know what it is, man, but I think kind of back in the day, a lot of times churches would have kind of maybe a mom in their church, or just someone who kind of had the time and bandwidth to kind of oversee this kids ministry. Right. And that's what a lot of churches did. If you weren't a big church and hire a full-time kids director and had the resources to make that happen, that's what a lot of churches did. And I think what we found in our situation, because we asked, got the Rolodex out, went down the list, had a lot of cool but some awkward conversations with people where they had to kindly tell us no. And so, man, we just kind of struggled with that. And I think we did for a couple of reasons. Number one is maybe it's just part of a broader thing that we're seeing. There's not as many people going into ministry in general. I think just pastors or just people who are willing to kind of step into ministry. It's just hard times, especially post-COVID, it's kind of a weird world. And so less people are kind of taking that leap. And so if there's less pastors or people going into vocational ministry, that means that there's going to be less kind of kids directors and people who are willing to lead that. And so we've kind of struggled with that. And then also in our kids ministry, it is proportionally large for our church. And so when you talk about kind of the mom who has some bandwidth to do that, or the woman who is just passionate about that, I think that's possible when you have 30 kids ministry, it's not when you have 115 kids on Sunday. That's a
lot of kids
thing,
to oversee.
Exactly. And so that's been a struggle of ours, and we're still looking. We're always kind of open for that. But I think in the season we just realized that we need someone a dedicated staff member who's over this, to oversee a team. And I'll talk about our team in a second. We have a wonderful team of volunteers, but we just realized we kind of need someone to kind of oversee that in the season. And then number two, I would say the next biggest challenge is what I call the kids ministry volunteer monster. It's a machine. You think about how many volunteers it takes to kind of oversee 110 kids on a Sunday, because you don't want to put one person with like 30 kids, it's like, good luck, we'll see you in an hour and a half maybe, unless Pastor Mac preaches long, or whatever. It's like 11:30 and they're like, get us out of here, Jurassic Park, and so it's just the machine that is like kind of kids ministry. And so it takes, man, I haven't looked at the most recent numbers, but maybe like 30 volunteers, maybe 25 or so, to kind of like make this happen on a Sunday. And so, there's always this kind of challenge of kind of getting people to kids ministry. And I will say, when you present volunteer opportunities to people, greet team, kids team, and production team, you really got to strong arm them into kids team, right? Everyone's like, I can greet people at the door. It's that team's full. Sorry. But man, the kids ministry one, you really have to cast vision for that. And we had to do that last year, right? We were kind of taking steps forward in our kids ministry, and Pastor John and I kind of went before the church and said, this is really, really important to us. And we recruited I think 40 people into the kids ministry. And so it's a growing thing, but I think it's an important thing. Like, there's something about serving someone else's kid that I think is representative of Christ. And I feel really strongly about that, us taking care of each other's kids. So that's definitely a big challenge. And then lastly, I think I mentioned it before, just finding a curriculum, finding something that works for our context. A lot of times if you try to pull something off the internet or buy some expensive curriculum, it just doesn't feel like it fits for your people and your time period and your moment. And so we have to kind of contextualize that for our church. And so that's been a challenge. And so it feels like on every front, whether it's a Bible study or kids, it's like New Day, we got to write our own thing. And we love doing that, because once we do that, then that's something that's going to bless us for years to come and bless our other locations. And so just really excited about that. But kids ministry is definitely challenging.
Well, and I think that it's important too to remember every ministry, during every season, you're going to have challenges. But the challenges that we're currently facing are birthing not out of a low, but out of a good thing.
It's true.
That God is moving, the church is growing, and with that comes needs and opportunities. And we look at these challenges, for people that are listening, it's God is not creating those opportunities if he's not also calling people to step into those places.
There you go. Yep.
So there is incredible opportunity. If there's a need because God is doing great things, then who is it that God is calling? That we're waiting on the yes, in order to walk into the next season of what God has for you. Because I've served in churches, and maybe you've visited churches where there are no kids, and it's really sad. And when kids walk in the church, a family of kids walk in the church, it's almost creepy. Because the church is like, hello, oh my gosh, everybody be on it, here we go, and it gets really intense. And so I don't think people recognize how unique it is that a church like ours would have almost 50% of the people there on a Sunday are children. That's an incredibly large percentage, and it's not like 50% of 30 people, There's a lot of people in the room, but that ratio it means that there are young families that are coming, God is moving, and then there's places for people, the places for people to serve. But, even with that, James, let me ask you this question, we see that the ministry is going, we see that, that we're in transition, and you're a parent, I'm a parent, we both have young kids. What would you say to parents, as excited as we are, what would you say to parents right now that are raising children in this season, in these crazy times?
Yeah, well, this is a good question. I want to camp out here for a little bit, because I think everyone feels it. I would say if you feel it's kind of crazy, or raising kids is kind of crazy right now, it's not just you. It is, it's always hard, but I don't know why it just feels uniquely hard right now, because there is a lot of chaos in the world. There's a lot of instability in the world, and a lot of institutions that used to be very stable. Maybe it's government, or maybe it's the school that your kid goes to. It feels like, especially maybe here in the kind of Houston area, those things are being upended a little bit. And it feels like, okay, that these places that I thought would be more stable for my kid, or more of a structured thing for my kid, like their school, is there's a lot of chaos around those things, right? And so so it is really hard raising kids kind of in this environment, not just because of kind of the institutions kind of blowing up post-COVID, but also because just a cultural moment, there's we used to talk about the culture wars, and it feels like those things are still going on, and it's more complicated, more confusing, and there's even more culture wars than there were in the past. And so, it's really hard to raise a kid right now, especially if you want them to be a well-adjusted, educated, but also kind of faithful member of society. That's a tall order. And so parents are my job's already hard, and now I got 2 or 3 kids, and this is going to be really hard. So I just want to sympathize with you that it is crazy times. It's not unique to you. And so whatever you're feeling that's a true and accurate feeling of this moment. But in the midst of that, I would say that we do have a responsibility to pass down the faith, that is a biblical mandate on anyone who engages in this wonderful calling of being a parent. You are called to pass down the faith, and whether or not your kids choose to follow in that faith is not up to you, but you're called to faithfully pass it down and transmit the love and heart and teachings of Jesus. And you see that in the Old Testament. There's a lot of verses throughout Deuteronomy as God talks to Israel about this idea of kind of passing down the faith to the next generation, and how God is faithful to the next generation. And even in the New Testament, we talk about, Timothy is someone who had the faith handed down to him from his grandmother to his mother to him. Surprisingly, his father, not mentioned in that one. But his faith is passed down to him. And so we're called to do that. My parents handed down the faith to me, and I made that choice when I was 12 years old to accept that and step forward into the faith. And so we're called to do that. So regardless of how hard it is, we're called to do that. And so that's, I would say, to any parent watching this, to take that responsibility seriously. But I want to give you, and then Pastor Mac, I want to let you share as well, because you have a broader range of age kids, which I'm sure is interesting.
Just 'cause I have
but
several.
I want to share just maybe 3 practical rhythms that you can incorporate maybe into your family to kind of help them on this journey of discipleship. And so just 3 things that I'm doing. And so I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. So my kids are a little bit on the younger side. And so I'm in the early stages of kind of incorporating these things into our family. But the first of those is, just take them to church, which sounds very simple. But I would say that your kids are going to see Jesus and the church as important as you do. They're never going to see it as more important than you do, right? So you've got to set that tone. You've got to say this is important for our family. And so take them to church. I mean, I think if you're not making that a priority, don't let them dictate whether or not you're coming to church that Sunday. That was something my parents used to do, or not do. It didn't matter how I felt, unless I was deathly ill or whatever on a Sunday. It's you're coming to church with us. And church has come a long way in kids ministry from back in the day when I used to sit in the service and draw on the little offering sheet, which with the little pencils that used to get stuck in there. And so church has come a long way. Kids ministry has come a long way. And so church is a place that is fun for kids as they learn about Jesus. So that's number 1, make that a priority and don't let them dictate whether they come. And then number 2, which I've been trying to do, is just pray with them every night. I love to hear about this kind of family moment that you guys have, but I'm starting real simple just with that prayer. With Cameron, my 4-year-old, and just I model it, I pray, and then I ask him a couple of questions that kind of lead him to understand or kind of get a feel for how he's going to pray. What are you thankful for, or who should we pray for? Is anyone sick in your class or your teacher? So then he prays, and then my wife will pray. And so it's just a rhythm. It's a non-negotiable rhythm that we do every night. I even do that with my 1-year-old. I just pray over him. I think there's something about that and establishing that young that's really important. There's a lot of things that we do every day, we eat every day, we give them breakfast every day, but I love this idea of kind of praying with them every day, and that sets a tone and a rhythm, and I think God blesses that. Right. And then number 3, it feels like it shouldn't be in this list of 2 things, or it feels too basic, but my number 3 for anyone who is trying to raise kids to love Jesus in this crazy world, number 3 is just be a good parent. Just be a good, intentional parent, know. And the reason I say that is because when your kids are young, obviously you are their role model, you are their world, and as they grow older, obviously that relationship changes. But I think, man, one of the very best things we can do for our kids is just to be a good parent to them and a loving parent to them. And as we do that, I think that the things that we say will have merit and weight. And so when we talk about Jesus and what he's done, or about his love, like they will have no concept of that except through how you have demonstrated and exemplified that. So when you talk about the love of God, they're going to see that and equate that with however your love to them has been manifest, right? So that's just number 3. It's just like, be a good parent, and just don't have to be a perfect parent, but just be faithful in this thing of parenting and love them really well. But what about you, Mac? You've had a lot of experience with this. What would you say to any person who's kind of watching this and just like, I want to raise my kids faithfully? What are some simple things I can do in the midst of my busy life to make that happen?
Yeah, well, obviously I've got 4 kids. So my oldest, Jaden, who just got baptized, is 8. Then we have Arya, who's 6, soon to be 7. Judah, who's 4, soon to be 5, and Mila, who's almost 2. And we're about to hit the birthday stage where like every month there's a birthday, and you're like, all right, fine, whatever. So here's what I think has a principle that has stuck with me. When I was in seminary, my Joshua through Kings professor at Reformed Theological Seminary, one of the days he was lecturing, made the point that when you read through the book of Judges, you see this statement being made several times, that there arose a generation that didn't know. And through tears, he said, I'm thankful that my kids can never say that I withheld from them the knowledge of the goodness of God in their lives. And so the principle that I think guides us as parents in terms of how we disciple our kids is that our kids need to know about the goodness of God. And we can, and in providing a stable environment and good education and, all that kind of stuff, if we don't also make primary letting them know about the goodness of God and who he is, then we are robbing our kids of something good, and actually the greatest good. So I think that's kind of the overarching principle. I think with every family, how that gets done can vary. So like what you do with your kids and what I do with my kids, it might look a little different, but the principle is the same, which is we want to talk to them about God, like knowledge. We want to talk to them about their faith and see how they're applying it. And then we want them to see us and interact with us as we practice. So to me, I think that whatever you do, you don't have to be an incredible scholar to teach. I think that for us, we have children's Bibles and books that we read. We also utilize during our family worship time, like free YouTube videos of children's Bible stories. Sometimes those animated ones really capture well, especially since we have the 2-year-old. She's like, oh snap, it's movie time, and like really
dialed in.
She's dialed in, and then you can ask questions afterwards. So what happened in this story? When it comes to prayer, our kids, they love praying. Actually, 4 or 5 of the 7 nights a week, they're fighting for who's praying. And what I love at this point, and I'm not making this up, is that we now have to restrict Mila, the youngest one, from praying every night, because when we ask who wants to pray, she 100% wants to pray every single night. And it's not just, like cute. I mean, it is cute, but, thank you, God, for this day, for my family, and then, amen, but she loves to pray. And I love seeing my kids pray. And then when it comes to music, this is the thing that I encourage people in. You don't have to, like, I have a deep music background. And so, I've got a guitar, keyboard, djembe, all kinds of instruments in my house because I've been a musician for a long time. But you don't have to be an expert musician to sing with your kids and for them to see you worshiping God through song. Literally, get a worship video, put it on the screen, and sing along with it. And I think the biggest thing is don't put it on so that they can do it. Whatever you do, participate in it, That's really the biggest thing. Whatever you're doing, it's a participatory thing, not just for them, but for you as well. And I think that time of family worship binds the family together, brings the foundation of the family in that, and then leads them towards that. And then ultimately you get other questions. Like this morning when I dropped my younger 2 kids off at school, my 4-year-old, as we're getting out of the van, and we're not even talking about church. I think the Crazy song from the Lego 2 movie was on in the car, and then I'm shutting it off, and he goes, "Mac, when you or not Mac, because we're not on a first name basis, Dad, Dad, when you preach, is it fun?" And, as I'm unloading the car and we're walking toward the school, like, yeah, so then why do you preach? And so even in that 30 seconds, I got to explain to my kids about calling and responding to God's call. I do enjoy it, but I preach because God told me to tell others about him and to lead the church. And he's like, okay. And he keeps going on. Those are small seeds and deposits. So anybody can participate in those kinds of things. I would say find something that is simple and sustainable, and then, religiously keep that rhythm, be very zealous and vigilant to keep that rhythm up. And that's why I think it's easier to start small than to create some lofty goal and then, fizzle out like your New Year's goals or something like that. So I say all that to say that's kind of where I am. And that's why I love hearing that you get to pray with your kids and worship with them as well. But that was a lot from me. So one last question. What are some other ways that New Day is helping in this mission of helping kids grow? Yeah.
Yeah. So two areas I wanted to highlight because people may not be as familiar with these, but they're a part of. I want people to know kind of like, well, what's our big picture plan? Like, how are we discipling like across the board in assisting parents? And so kind of two other ministries I kind of wanted to talk about really quick is number one, just our student ministry. Which kind of launched with our fourth graders, and so kind of it's building every single year. And we're super passionate about this because again, if you grew up with like some church experience or background, a lot of times like youth ministry or middle school and high school ministry are like very formative seasons like in your life, and they were for me.
Yeah.
And I was even like recounting here at New Day when I think about like some of the people who are on staff or in leadership positions. I think of like Pastor John. I think of like Amy Horn and Emily McKenzie and myself and Chelsea Quadra, like these people who are help leading in many ways the mission, like all coming out of like the same youth group. And I'll never forget our pastor kind of like setting us down and saying, I want you to be the pillars of this group. I want you to help lead this group. And there's something about that I think like really was important for our formation, and like deposited that kind of like that faith and leadership in us and importance of kind of like being a part of this mission. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do here with our student ministry. And so we started that. We've tried to start it a couple of times, a little bit of false starts, but like, it just clicked when we put our creative director, Britton, kind of over the ministry, and he's done an incredible job. So every Sunday night, we have or Sunday evening, we have a 5 p.m. service for our students. And so in that service, they're doing all the things we talked about. There's corporate worship, there's a hearing of the word, there's a breakout discussion with the boys and girls, there's fun, and like these things are really, really important. So New Day is totally and completely behind our student ministry and wanting to make sure that there is something in Oak Forest for any kid who's in middle and high school. And, this is the ministry is on the smaller side, not as big as our kids ministry, but we know that we wanted to start it and commit to this because we got a wave of kind of younger kids who are hitting that age, those third graders, fourth graders. And so like, we want to make sure that like, they don't get to the end of kids ministry and it's like it's a ministry cliff, it's like running into a ministry cliff. Right. And so just really excited about that. So if you have a kid who's in fourth grade or up, I'd love for you to be like a committed part of that ministry or whatever church you're a part of, like to make sure your kids are a part of those kinds of ministries. And if you have a kid who's in third grade at New Day Church here in Oak Forest, just know that like they got a great ministry coming for them in the future. And so really excited about that. And then the last thing that like maybe people don't quite see this as being incorporated into kind of like what New Day does for the next generation is I just want to highlight the New Day School, which started as a preschool that we started a little over 5 years ago, I think, and just a resource to our community. And last year we expanded that to include an elementary side as well. And so, every year we are basically adding another grade onto the New Day School until it goes to 5th grade and maybe more, who knows? But we're just starting with that. And really our heart is like not necessarily to kind of like pull kids away from the chaos. There can be that mindset sometimes. I'm going to pull my kids from public school or pull them from kind of the chaos of the world. And that's not our intention at all. But really our intention is to provide like an alternative space for kids to be not only just like learn the facts about the world, but also to have their worldview formed by the scriptures. And that's really our heart for the New Day School. And so, man, if you're around the Oak Forest area and you have a kid who is in kinder or up, I'd strongly consider you to kind of like research that and look into that, or talk to Amy Horn, who's our director. And man, this is just a big part. Like New Day wants to provide as many resources as possible for people as you raise your kids in this crazy, hectic world, because times are different than we were growing up, way different. And so we just want to make sure that people are being resourced with as they lead their kids. But man, super excited about Next Gen, super excited about kids ministry, and the future is bright, as we say.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I love that. I love that so much. You know, our young people, I think everybody who, everybody in church can look back and see that not just in church, all of us can look back and see that there was a teacher, somebody when we were young that was influential and important in forming us and shaping us. And so, you know, this investment, whether it's children's or, you know, our youth ministry, this is about making investments that will see the fruit of it 10 years, 20 years down the road, as to where we are. I think the coolest thing for me was, you know, I grew up in a little apartment church in kind of low-income apartment complex in West Houston, and we had a missionary that stayed in our apartment complex and did after-school programs and tutoring and all this kind of stuff my whole childhood. And she was already old then, you know, like back in the 80s, and she's still alive, but even older now. But about 8 years, no, not 8, like 6.5 years ago or so, after she'd long since been retired, but she came back to Houston, and I got to sit down at a Benihana, and she's holding my son. You know, at the time, Jaden is, I don't know, a year old or so, and you know, and she's in her 80s or something like that, but she had made a deposit 30 years before. And that I'm where I am today, and my kid, and you know, now Jaden's being baptized in part because Miss Peggy made an investment in the next generation, you know, and so I think that when we're talking about these things, whether it's New Day School, whether it's, you know, youth ministry, children's ministry, I think we have to see the big picture of how small things and deposits and investments in the next generation's life lead to big life change later. And so we get to be a part of that. We get to support the mission of doing that here at New Day Church. And then ultimately, the challenge for those of you that are listening to this and you attend New Day is, how is God calling you to be a part of making that deposit into the next generation? How do we ensure that the families that are here can say and be strengthened, equipped, and encouraged to be able to say to their children, about their children, this is not the generation that was raised up and didn't know. You know, that to me, that's a rallying cry for so much of like, let our kids never say, well, we just never knew. Like, now you knew, you did with it as you did, you know, you made a choice about what you were going to do with it, but we told you about it. We showed you, we demonstrated these things to you. So to me, it's exciting to see all the things that we're doing and to think about, man, what's going to happen in 30 years? Because when you were, you know, here as a kid in youth group, and it's not like people realized then that you would be an XP.
Yeah,
you know.
True.
But here you are as the XP, you know, and I think that's awesome, you know, for us to be able to see that. The leaders in the church today were once kids who needed support, direction, discipleship, encouragement. So how is God calling us to step into that vision? It's not just a handful of people. We all play a role in ensuring that the next generation is raised in the Word.
That's a good word. Yeah. Man. Well, thank you guys for watching, and I hope this was helpful to you. Certainly fun to shoot. But man, thank you guys for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe this, and be on the lookout for future episodes.